What Happens in the Woods is a true crime podcast. We discuss events that are often violent in nature. Listeners' discretion is advised.
Christopher Bernard Wilder, the man in this grainy dating video.
I have what I call a need to meet and socialize on a more wider basis than I have been doing.
Will torture and abuse dozens of women.
I get put into the trunk of the car. He was electrocuting me, and he had superglued my eyes shut.
Wilder would become one of the world's most sadistic predators and a serial killer, preying on young women here and in America for over 2 decades.
There are very few people that have a brush with a serial killer like you've had.
I was just very lucky.
It all began here on Australian beaches.
We're talking an Australian serial killer which nobody's heard of, which is quite astonishing in itself.
He made #1 on the most wanted list of the FBI faster than anyone else in the United States.
Well, he was a true psychopath, a true narcissist, pure evil.
Pure evil that tonight we can trace all the way back to 1965 and to these Sydney sand dunes. We name Wilder as the #1 suspect in the shocking and unsolved Wanda Beach murders of 2 teenage schoolgirls.
He didn't just take your sister, did he?
He took my life away from me.
There is a saying that when a person's actions show you who they are, you should believe them. In this episode, we take a look at a man whose sexual deviancy progressed to a point that he was showing police exactly the type of sick, sexual pervert that he was. The problem was, his words and money were speaking louder than his actions. This episode, we cover a killer and sociopath who made the FBI's most wanted list in 1984. He has been named the Beauty Queen Killer because of his obsession with young, beautiful women. There is so much this man was able to get away with before everything ended, and the enormity of it will haunt all of his victims and their families, his own family and friends, and all of the investigators who tried in vain to get one step ahead of him before it was all over. This is True Crime Podcast, What Happens in the Woods, with your hosts, Jess and Bryce. Let's get started.
Happy New Year, friends. We hope everyone survived the holidays and that 2021 treats everyone a hell of a lot better than 2020 has. Yeah.
I don't have my hopes up.
I don't either. Just because the year's changing doesn't mean shit.
No.
Same shit, different year. Right?
Sometimes.
Yeah. So I had mentioned that we do have kind of a surprise announcement, and that's being that we have some merch that has been asked for a couple of different times by some people, and we're not hoping to get anything out of it. We're just making a couple shirts. So we are sitting here recording in official What Happens in the Woods merch.
Oh,
you know you've got it on. Don't start.
I didn't know it was official.
What else would it be?
Pretend? I don't know.
Pretend merch?
Let's make this for fun.
Yeah. Well, whatever. So keep a lookout for that. There will be more information coming for that when we decide we actually want to launch it. I just wanted to make sure that it looked right. I didn't want to put anything out there that looked like shit. So I'm very OCD about that, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine.
Perfectionist in me.
Sure.
It's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine. All right. So we don't have time for chit chat. We don't have time for fucking announcements. If you have anything to say, I don't have time.
Welcome back, Australia, to the top. Thank you, Australia.
Yes. Thank you, Australia. And that fits right in with what we're talking about today. So we have a bonus episode for you to start your new year off with a bang. Australia was like second only to the U.S. as far as location for where listeners are for weeks. For most of this season, it kind of went off in England, UK came in, but they're back. So I kind of got to thinking about, I'm sure there's cases all over the world I've never heard of, and maybe Australia has some interesting cases, and why not just look into it? So I started down this rabbit hole, and I had no idea I was going to find this. It's crazy. It's a crazy story. I had no idea what I was getting into. I thought I just found something simple. It's never simple.
Yeah.
So for our bonus episode, I knew I had to cover the unbelievable and horrific case of the Wanda Beach Murders. But like I said, it turned out to be so much more. I'm going to warn everyone now, this is a long one. I'm kind of thinking this is going to be one of our longest yet, to be honest with you.
Okay.
So everybody buckle in for the ride. We're going to just jump right in. So on January 11th, 1965, two friends, Marianne Schmidt and Christine Sherrick, were planning a trip with four of Marianne's younger siblings to the beach. The girls were very responsible. They had been helping out because Marianne's mom had been in the hospital. So the older kids had been taking care of the younger kids. And then the neighbors had been kind of helping out too while she was in the hospital. So Christine lived with her grandparents next door to the Schmidt family. And as far as anyone knew, the plan was that she was going to wake up early. She was going to meet up with Marianne and her siblings, and then all of them would catch the train to Cronulla Station. There was a local park and a beach. They were going to eat a picnic lunch that they had packed. They were going to play on the beach, and then they were supposed to be home that afternoon. And the trip started off fine. They made it to the park. They made it to the beach. It was about 11 a.m. They played, did what you're going to do at the beach, had fun. Then the group started walking along to another area called Wanda Beach. I guess the wind was picking up, and so the sand was, just everywhere. And so they started to kind of make their way to another area where there's these sand dunes that, they could kind of get some shelter in for a little bit. And these are pretty well-known sand dunes for like people who want to bathe nude. There's privacy because they're so expansive. Or, people who want to have a lover's tryst, get a little action in on the beach.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So, it was well known to be like a little secluded, not little, but secluded. You could find a little secluded area there. But it also afforded them some cover from the sand. So they walk up there, and Marianne and Christine wanted to go exploring. So they left the younger kids to play in the sand, kind of near a dune, said they'd be back just to hang out there. And that was the last time they were seen. So when it got really late in the afternoon, the eldest of the siblings that was there made the judgment call to pack it up and get his younger siblings home.
Yeah.
And they had no idea where the girls were. None whatsoever. So he hoped that, on the way home, they would either see the girls or they'd get home and the girls would be there like, oh, we lost you. We couldn't find you. He just was really hoping there would be an explanation. There wasn't. So when they got home, they had to tell Marianne's two older brothers that were at home doing like house chores for the day. And then Christine's grandparents that the two girls weren't with them. And the police were immediately called. There was a report made. The best lead that they had was Marianne's younger brother, who was, I believe, 8 at the time. He had possibly been the only person to see the girls kill her. And he told investigators that there had been this guy at the beach, a surfie, that he had seen the girls talking to. And a surfie, I kind of got, just from the description, is what we would consider in the U.S. a beach bum.
Yeah.
Like just somebody who's always hanging out at the beach and doesn't really, make a living necessarily.
Yeah.
They're just hanging out at the beach, catching the waves all the time. So the brother had seen this guy, this younger guy, probably late teens, early 20s, trying to catch crabs on the beach earlier that day with a spear, and he had a knife and a spear, and he was trying to like catch crabs that were in a little, what are they called? I'm blanking on the word.
I don't know.
Like the little puddles that form.
Pools?
Tide pool. Thank you. So he then saw the guy again when the girls went off into the dunes. He had seen the guy with his arms around the two girls, and he had a towel, blue towel, just hanging off of his shoulder.
Uh-huh.
He looked like he was guiding them up into the dunes, further into the dunes. And then he saw him a third time after that coming out of the dunes, and he had a really agitated look on him. Like shit just was pissing him off.
Yeah.
And that was, a lot of information, and he gave a good description, but they weren't able to get much information from that, like to do anything with. So the hunt was on. News coverage was far and wide over the story. A few reports I read stated that search was the largest manhunt in the history of New South Wales. In the 60s, that's quite a thing to say.
Yeah.
Their bodies actually were found by a gentleman and his two young nephews about 2 days after the girls disappeared in the sand dunes at Wanda Beach. Both had been put through hell before being killed and partially buried in the sand and just left there. So it's believed that Marianne was the first killed while Christine was trying to escape. Marianne was stabbed 15 times with a large serrated knife. And then the killer caught up to her friend, beat her in the head with a large rock on the back of her head, and then dragged her over to where Marianne was.
Mm-hmm.
Christine tried to fight him. She had wounds that were inflicted from, trying to defend herself. But she didn't get very far. She fought him, and then he eventually overpowered her, raped her, ended up beating her face in and stabbing her until she finally stopped breathing.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was very violent. He then raped and abused Marianne, leaving semen all over her body. When he finished, he laid the girls in a line, so basically like feet to head, and then covered them in sand and fucking walked away like nothing had happened.
I'm wondering how busy that beach is, and like no one heard them scream or no one heard them struggle or...
I kind of had the same thought, and then I was trying to think, you're at the ocean. The ocean is loud. You're in the middle of kind of a sand storm-ish, like the winds were picked up a lot. And you're going to hear like seagulls, you're going to hear, other beach noise. So you might hear something, like somebody might have heard somebody screaming, but they might have thought it was somebody in the cold water, or, you know what I mean? Kids are screaming, running around. It's a busy, populated beach. It's
sure,
possible to hear something in the distance and think nothing of it.
But you can definitely tell a scream versus like having fun and yelling and screaming. But
no, true. And I did think of that. I kind of wondered if Christine was probably screaming while she was running away, but I figured that Marianne probably didn't have time to scream because he had stabbed her in her chest. So he probably punctured lungs. I mean, that's, she actually, I'll get to that. But yeah, some of her wounds probably would have a little bit, but that's okay. Some of her wounds maybe would have made it impossible for her to cry out too much. But Christine might have gotten some screams in before he finally bashed her head in, and then she's disoriented. And how loud is she going to be able to scream while she's, trying to fight somebody off? So like I said, it's possible that somebody heard something and just didn't think much of it because of where they were and other loud noise. Yeah, I don't know. From what I understand though, these sand dunes are pretty expansive.
Okay.
So they might have been in an area where nobody was. And I'm not sure. But I thought about that too. Like, who doesn't hear that? Who doesn't notice that? The kids that were there waiting for them to come back never said that they heard anything. So I don't know. Yeah, so the knife that was used to stab both the victims was never found. But a blue towel and a spear were later recovered. Marianne's brother confirmed in a statement that both of those were items that the young Surfy had. The coroner's report claimed Christine had a blood alcohol level of 0.015 when she was tested, which is about what you would get from like an afternoon beer, is what they equated that to. They weren't sure how she would have gotten the alcohol, though. They were only 15 years old. So somebody gave it to her.
Maybe the surfy.
Maybe. Or maybe she snuck one away from somewhere.
Maybe.
I mean, they were planning this day trip. Maybe she got one and just kept a hold of it from her house or, yeah. Her cause of death was from the head trauma and the stab wounds. Marianne's cause of death was from hemorrhaging from a neck wound and the stabbings. So I think if he got the right stab in the right place, she wouldn't have been able to cry out. Yeah. So unfortunately, this case is not really solved. It's never been solved. But all these years later, investigators have one very clear and believable suspect that fits the profile. And that's a suspect that was actually named in a report given by his wife as a potential lead 4 years after the crime. A suspect that police never got to interview due to lack of diligence in working on that lead. And that is what leads us to the sickening story of Christopher Bernard Wilder and the string of victims that he left in his wake. I'm going to go into like his life and crimes chronologically. There's a lot of crossover in it. So there's a lot of information that I can't put in for sake of being as brief as I can. There's just no telling actually how much he's done, like what he got away with because of it. But there is a lot of crossover in his victims and in his crimes. So Christopher Wilder was born on March 13th, 1945 to parents Colleen and June Wilder. That was a year after they married. His father was in the military and the family moved around a lot during his childhood. They later went back to Australia. His dad had retired from the military in 1959 and his mom was like, enough, I'm not moving anymore. We're going to go back to where I'm from. She was Australian and he was in the U.S. military. So they met, while the dad was traveling. Yeah. She said, we're going back to Australia. I need to be with my family. We've moved around too much and I want my kids to be settled. So the rocky marriage, they stuck together, but they didn't have a good time. Yeah. It was said that the dad was abusive and possibly like into corporal type punishment with the kids. Christopher was the eldest, so he took the worst of it. Oh. He didn't fit well into school. He was a loner. He was antisocial, but he liked being at the beach and he liked surfing. And that's where you would find him most days. Very early on, Wilder showed deviant behavior. That is a classic warning sign of a sociopathic, sexually motivated killer. First, he was accused of trying to do, quote, something to a girl. I couldn't figure out what this something was. Yeah. Then he started roaming the neighborhood, prowling and peeping. We've heard that before. Yes. Then the parents kind of got embarrassed by his weird behavior, and they took him out of high school, and they set him up in a carpenter's trade school to be like an apprentice to a carpenter. Yeah. And they were trying to get him to focus on, a life goal, a career goal, instead of being a weird peeping Tom. But, that classic, if you act like something's not wrong, you can't be wrong, right? No. There's just nothing wrong. Everything will just go away. So as I mentioned, his relationship with his dad was pretty violent. The one with his mom was sexual yet cold. He actually would peep on her. And he liked to masturbate while jerking. He would jerk off while wearing her clothes. Yeah. Wow. So Wilder learned that he could get close to females by posing as a photographer at the beach and offering model jobs, like modeling jobs to his victims. Wow. Everybody wanted to be the next Twiggy right then. For those who aren't old enough to know who Twiggy is, she is the iconic model of the 60s. I mean, you couldn't see any ad without her or somebody trying to imitate her being in it. She's very iconic, almost the start of like the supermodel craze, yes. I feel. I know there were others around that time, but she was one of the main icons. He became obsessed with this idea after reading a book, and eventually there was a movie that came out called The Collector by John, I think it's Fowles. It's Fowles. It's basically, so it's a story of a guy who just doesn't have good luck with women.
Mhm.
They kind of brush him off. And so he decides the best way to have a relationship that he wants, because he doesn't like being dismissed anymore, is to kidnap a woman, turn her into a sex slave, and she'll be, his perfect relationship.
Oh, it always works out.
It always works out, right? So Wilder decides that the best way he's going to do this is he's going to, take his camera to the beach and say, "Oh, I'd love to make you the next big model.
Mhm.
And can I get some photos of you? I'm, a model search scout, and I'm going to make you rich. Your face is going to be everywhere."
Wow.
And he literally
Refuse,
his,
huh?
well, who's going to refuse that? Yeah, every young girl's dream of being, recognized, envied for looks, wealthy, living a luxurious lifestyle, glamorous lifestyle. Young teenage girls, for the most part, I won't say every, but there are a lot of a good chunk of teenage females.
Well, I don't know what that's like.
Okay.
I've never been a young female.
Really?
Yeah.
No, not you.
No, I haven't.
Okay. Yeah. So he definitely perfected that. And this is definitely a running theme throughout all of his escapades.
So no carpentry, huh?
No, he uses that. That's like the side gig, even though that's what gets him money. This is his focus. Yeah. So, of course, there's always, a first known offense that kicks off every criminal's career. Wilder's was a sexual assault of a 16-year-old girl in 1963. He was one of 3 males who attacked the girl. He didn't try to deny it at all. He pleaded guilty. And what ended up happening was he paid a 20-pound fine and was told to be a good boy for 12 months. And they'd let him go.
On a sexual assault?
Yep.
Okay.
It's 1963.
Sure.
So he went right back to working as a carpenter with no true repercussions of his behavior. He continued on his thought process of hitting up the beaches on the weekends. He was searching for beautiful young girls who were going to fall for all of his promises to become this next international model.
Okay.
So this is when the Wanda Beach murders occur, but as stated, police at the time had no idea that their best and likely suspect was Christopher Wilder. It later came out that he was actually living in that area at the time.
Yeah.
And that he, given his criminal history, should have been looked at, but he wasn't. So there was a profile done by a forensic psychologist from New South Wales after the death occurred. Even though it wasn't really a thing to profile back then, the psychologist described the killer as in their late teens, early 20s, would be standoffish to most people and family, quick to violence, and good at hiding his deviant tendencies from people. So very clearly, if they had known to look in his direction, would have pointed right to him. In Wilder's case, his family, at least his mother and his father to some extent, must have had some idea of the type of deviancy that Wilder was capable of, because she began forcing him into electric shock therapy.
Okay.
Right. So he would later tell his therapist in the U.S. how all of this went down and how his mother had humiliated him with doing that. This type of therapy is highly controversial, even to this day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a common practice. Now they do provide like sedation and relaxation medication that they can give people before they perform this. They didn't back then at all. It was, you were completely alert and awake and usually strapped down, and it was a very violent experience. He went 3 times. I don't think it really helped him with anything. If anything, I think it made it worse, and you'll see why.
Okay.
I don't think it helps anybody in any condition. I've never heard of a good outcome of it, but I will admit it's not something I readily research. I just know that it sounds horrific.
It just seems, it's almost like foreplay for the electric chair.
I mean, a little bit.
I'm not kidding. Man.
Yeah.
It's that's what it is.
Yeah, it is very weird. I don't know who thinks, let's help somebody with their mental state by electrocuting them.
Yeah.
I don't know who came to that conclusion. So, like I said, he went for 3 treatments before refusing to go back. And his mom then set him up for group therapy for sex addicts. And I couldn't find if he actually went, or if he went and it helped, or it didn't last, or I'm not sure the outcome of that. She signed him up, but I don't know if he actually went.
Okay.
So over a period of 2 years, from 1965 to 1967, there's no way of knowing how many women, if any, Wilder had encounters with. He spent any free time canvassing beaches in the Sydney area, perfecting his play at being a photographer. He actually might have been a good photographer. He was faking it so much.
Yeah.
But he was using it for these shit, excuses.
Yeah.
Then he met a young Christine Pollock, and she was out with her family, her mom, her dad, and her younger sister for a day at the beach. And soon her and her sister were under his spell. He actually Christine was right around the age of 18, 19. Her younger sister was still a minor at the time, and he actually tried to get with her first. And the parents were like, hell to the fucking no.
Yeah.
And so it was like, oh, okay, well, Christine will do. So they were married in 1968, and she tried to be happy with it. Their parents were not happy. Neither one of their parents were happy about the union. So the relationship was rough for Christine. It was very rough. Wilder was abusive mentally, physically, and sexually, and he liked to inflict pain, and he got off on it. That's how he got off.
Oh.
He had no care for her well-being. There were times when she was degraded and made to do sexual acts that she didn't want to perform, but he would beat her if she didn't. He would, abuse her and rape her multiple times, and so much so that she would be in pain, and he liked it.
Yeah.
And that's what their marriage consisted of. That's not even just them dating or him, using her as a victim and then doing away with. That's your marriage.
Jesus.
So I can't imagine, her mental state of things. But she did try to leave a few times. I read that he left, and then I read that she left. But at some point, they've separated multiple times during their short marriage. And they always came back to one another for whatever reason. Like I said, it's the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't get divorced.
Yeah.
You stuck it out. So police made contact with the couple on Valentine's Day in 1969. So they've only been married a little over a year. When the knock on the apartment door came, Christine answered it to find 2 officers just standing there wanting to question Wilder in connection to a young 18-year-old female who was being blackmailed for sex. Wilder knew he was caught, and the bastard admitted everything in front of Christine just to fuck with her. And he openly claimed he was the person responsible for the blackmail, that on one occasion he had the female come back to their home and had sex with her on their bed. Police took him into custody, got a statement from him at the station. He laid everything out. He didn't leave out a detail. He was happy to give them any information they wanted. He even admitted that he got the young girl to bring him other young girls to take pictures of and possibly rape.
Jesus.
Right. So police in the 60s were not equipped to handle him.
Yeah.
Not at all. Not by any means. The shitty part is that because of the young female not wanting to go to court over any of this, he didn't get charged.
Oh, God damn it.
Right. So he got away with it. No repercussions, even though he admitted to it, even though he clearly was like, yes, that's me. And I did it. And I even have proof. I have like photographic evidence. I'm astounded.
It's just like he wants to get caught because he's not denying any of it, nor is he backing away or even lawyering up. Yeah,
lawyering up. Yes. I'm like, what are you trying to say?
I speak the English.
Well, yeah, most days I do too. Yeah, it's unreal. The fact that you can admit to a crime and not get charged with it and not have any repercussions for your actions.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did it.
But
broke the law.
She didn't, they filed a report, but because she didn't want to go to court and have it publicized everywhere, she wanted to, keep her name as out of it as possible. That's what ends up happening. And criminals count on that shit. These type of criminals.
It too. It's the 1960s, God, just bad is bad.
Yeah, it's just very unfortunate. The rape wasn't necessarily even considered rape back then. They still had categories like sexual assault and sexual battery, which are categories, but they're lesser categories. So if you can't prove rape, you get a lesser, charge.
But you got this guy admitting to a crime and then just, it's so frustrating. I want to bang my head against the table.
No, for sure. And I'm sure there were a lot of people, the victim included, who were upset, but it's still hard for a victim to come forward. Even now, it's still hard for a victim to come forward because they get blamed or they get talked about. And
definitely victim shaming.
Yeah, for sure. So I can only imagine, I can imagine what she thought and how she felt and what her thought process was of not wanting to do that. And I can respect that.
Yeah.
I just can't even put myself in somebody's place like that because I've been fortunate enough that I've never had that happen to me. And I don't know how I would respond. I would like to think that I would just be like, fuck the world.
Yeah.
And you're going down. But honestly, I don't know. I don't know. So whatever, happened, Christine was finally done. And given his history of abuse during their marriage and his sexual tendencies, and the items that she found in his car of like pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
She was, and then this came along with the blackmailing of this girl. She was done. And for whatever reason, I'm not sure what led her to do it. When she thought about it, I guess, she went to the police 5 days later after the incident on Valentine's Day, and she filed a claim with them, like a report with them.
Yeah.
Saying that she thought he was the murderer of Christine Sherrick and Marianne Schmidt from the Wanda Beach Murders. She came out and named him, and her mom and her sister came along as like character witnesses for some shit that happened, that they knew of that happened with him as well.
While they were married. Or
right. Well,
in a relationship, but
even before they were married, he actually showed up at the house where Christine, his wife, her mom.
Yeah.
So his mother-in-law, before they got married, and he tried to force her into having sex with him.
The mother-in-law?
Mm-hmm.
Jesus.
And he still went ahead and married their daughter, No
wonder they had objections.
No, they definitely had objections. So she went to the police. The detective took the statements, added info from when he was 16 and, his record started, as well as the mugshot from that and a couple of profile of his characteristics. Then they sent that report on to the Wanda Beach investigators to follow up. Months later, investigators say they had been trying to find Wilder without success, and then they finally knocked on his parents' door in November of 1969.
Yeah.
She said, he moved to the U.S. in May. You guys are too late. This motherfucker got to the U.S., started a new life, and they had a lead that they didn't follow up on, and it was too late for them to do anything with it.
Jesus.
It was closed. So Christopher Wilder set himself up in Florida using his carpentry skills. He started working in construction and doing...
Did you say Florida?
Florida.
Jesus Christ.
Yes, Florida, our favorite place in the whole wide world. And he, set himself up doing construction work, like custom building jobs. He was saving up. He was gaining a reputation as a businessman. He was race car driving, and he was, really into fast cars, beautiful women. During this time, he also made one of those, for those who don't know or aren't old enough to know, before Tinder, you used to go into a business and you would make a video called a dating profile.
Oh, yeah.
And men would make it for women to find, women would make it for men to find, men on men, women on women, such as it goes.
Yeah.
And he went in and made a video of himself trying to find women. Even his video, you can find it online in one of the links that I'll leave for one of the news documentaries that I watched. So fucking egotistical. I find myself that you don't need anything but to be stabbed, you fucker. It's very eye-opening video to watch. Just casually sitting, reclining on a couch, talking about his needs and what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He eventually joined into a partnership with a friend in construction, so they started a business together, and it was very profitable, but Wilder slowly lost interest in it, and he actually stopped kind of working. He was skimming money off the books.
Yeah.
And his partner knew he didn't do much because they were making enough money, and he was just kind of putting up with it. It was just kind of weird.
The same pattern, people letting him get away with shit.
Right. Well, and like there were times when they would finish a job and his partner, whose name was Zeke Kimbrell, he would go and, send an invoice to the people, and they'd be like, hey, we already paid Chris. We paid Chris Wilder cash. Yeah. And he gave us a discount for paying in cash. Zeke was like, oh, okay. So my mistake. Where'd the cash go?
Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't do anything about it. So Wilder never lost the habit of searching for young, beautiful victims. He was claiming still he was a photographer. If they let him take some pictures, that, this would be their big break into modeling. And in 1971, he was arrested on solicitation when he was caught handing out fake business cards for Barbizon modeling agency, which I don't think is a thing anymore, but I still remember those stupid fucking commercials.
Yeah.
Where the chick is like twirling in the background, very 80s, very like
80s.
Yeah, very 70s and 80s, and everybody's just Barbizon,
yes,
Barbizon, like whispering it, and it was so seductive. He had fake cards printed up that he was a scout for Barbizon.
Yeah,
and he managed to get 2 teenage girls to go off with him to a secluded area and do a quote unquote photo shoot, where they eventually were told to get naked. They managed to get away, but not before being scarred for life at the experience. And the girls went to the police, and Wilder was arrested again, but they wouldn't testify, just like in Australia.
Oh, come on,
yeah,
man.
So he got off on charges of disorderly conduct. He paid a $25 fine between like the fine and the court fees. I think the fine was $15 and the court fees were $10.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, he pled guilty. He admitted that he did this, and nothing happened to him other than $25.
It's all like, I mean, us looking at it, you can see the pattern now, but serial killer pattern.
Yes. And I will say now, we have a system set up that is computerized and linked across countries, across states, across, counties even, that wasn't set up during this time.
Yeah.
There wasn't a computer system for Interpol. There wasn't a computer system, for the FBI. These things weren't set up in place that the information was wildly sent out to people.
Yeah.
It was, phone calls, or, they had just started doing these teletype, like telefax things in the late 70s. Even I think that started. It took forever to get information.
Yeah.
The news was your best resource at that time, because if you hit the right news source, it went out across, the nation.
Yeah.
And then from there, they could send it to international news. That was actually the fastest way you could get some of this information.
Yeah.
But there, you had to be selective of what you put out there too. You couldn't just give all the information.
No.
So yeah, it's just very frustrating, because he's admitting what he's doing and he's not getting reprimanded. So over the next few years, he spent a lot of time searching for young women to assault. He got into race car driving and turned to sex workers to fulfill his sexual desires. At one point, he got into a relationship where he was like, it was like a dominatrix type relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But he was the dominator, and the woman that he was dating was the submissive. She started taking control, and he didn't like it. He was humiliated by it. So he actually checked himself into a mental hospital in 1979 for sexual issues. And this is where he would meet his longtime therapist, Ginger Bush.
Why does that sound like a porn name?
It fucking does. It does.
Sorry.
No, it does. I was like, Ginger Bush? What the fuck is that code name for?
Is that a pseudo name?
Yeah.
That's your porn name.
That's her name. And I don't want to disregard her demeanor.
No, I don't either.
But goddamn that name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fuck your parents, man.
Yeah, man. I can only imagine the conversations that the two of them had.
Mm-hmm.
But he never once denied anything brought against him. So I'm assuming he told the therapist a lot.
I'm sure he did, because he never held back.
No. Therapy didn't stop him from doing anything, however. In June of 1980, Wilder drugged and assaulted 2 young women after picking them up from the Palm Beach Mall under the guise of, you guess it, model agent scouting for a pizza commercial. He let them go, and they went straight to the police. When he was arrested days later, he admitted to his guilt. The asshole claimed that he was happy it all came out in the open. He didn't know why he did it, but he needed help. He just needed some help.
Yeah, it's just like he wants to get caught. Like
Yes.
he's asking to get caught and help me, please, but they're not helping. Yeah.
Well, if he really wanted help, then that's one thing. If he's doing it just for the recognition and saying, help me, please, he's looking for recognition. He doesn't really want the help. It really easily could have been both or one or the other. Because if somebody is doing these crimes, who do you have to brag to it about?
Yeah.
You can't just go off and tell anybody.
But again, that's a pattern we see. Most serial killers want to tell their story and they want it to be known.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think he very much fell into that. So in court, it came down to he said, she said, and he did manage to get actual charges brought against him this time. He got 5 years of probation after pleading guilty to sexual battery. He also was mandated to weekly counseling for his sexual addiction. The fucking problem here is that Ginger Bush became his court-appointed therapist. Mm-hmm. She was already his therapist.
Yeah.
But because she worked with the courts, she became his court-mandated therapist. Obviously, she wasn't working for him.
No.
He needed somebody else, and they let the status quo go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though he was on probation, he managed to convince the courts to allow him a trip to Australia to visit his family. Why?
Yeah.
You're on probation. You don't go fucking anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. So in December of 1982, Wilder was back in his old haunts, and he was up to his old tricks. He was there only days when he lured 2 15-year-old girls to leave their friends to do a quote-unquote photo shoot. They started with simple photos in their swimsuits. They progressed to him making them change into lingerie that he had, just conveniently had it.
Of course.
Eventually, he got them to pose with no tops on. Then they ended up blindfolded and on their way to his hotel room where they were both sexually victimized. After they weren't as cooperative as he wanted, Wilder eventually took them back to where he picked them up. He threatened to expose them with the photos if either of them went to the authorities. They didn't know it, though. That had already been taken out of their hands because when they left, their friends took down his license plate number for the rental car and went and reported him to the police.
Good.
Yeah. So it was completely out of everybody's hands at that point. The police were looking for him. Police interview the girls, and they are quick to show up at Wilder's room. They've figured out where he was from the rental car. Uh-huh. Again, he admits to everything. Answering the officer's questions, doesn't hold back. He's taken to the station. He's charged with enticement of the minors and assault. This time, the charges are a little more substantial, and he's actually placed in jail. He managed to convince the judge to release him on bail after about a month in jail.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jesus.
His parents and his uncle put up their homes as collateral for the 400,000-pound bail. He put in $50,000 of his own money. Mm-hmm. And he was expected back in the country in 1984 for the trial. He had made it a sob story that, he had so many important contracts and business things to do that he had to go back to the U.S. And so that's why they agreed to the bail. This SOB is on his way back to America by the end of January 1983. In the U.S., he then quickly was charged with violation of his parole after it was learned that he was arrested in Australia.
Oh.
But again, a slap on the wrist was all he got. He surrendered himself and paid $1,000, and he was released. Once he's back home, he quickly abducts 2 young sisters, ages 10 and 12, from the side of the street. He pulls up his car alongside where they're walking on the sidewalk. This was near his home at Boynton Beach. The girls were forced into the car at gunpoint, taken to a secluded area, and assaulted and beat horrifically. Mm-hmm. And nobody knew that he was responsible until years later. So he got away with that.
God damn it.
Yeah. His blood type is a match from the evidence that's taken at the scene, but they didn't have him to give a sample to until years later.
Okay.
So he wasn't actually acknowledged as the suspect or the criminal responsible until after his death, I believe.
Oh.
Yeah. So Wilder is back on the prowl. He has no signs of stopping, and he's not getting caught. So why wouldn't he just go all ham, right?
Yeah.
Well, when we come back from the break, I will tell you all about the crime spree in the U.S. and that how eventually he was taken down. So in February of 1984, 20-year-old Rosario Gonzalez was reported missing after she didn't show back up at work after her lunch break, and she didn't get home that night. Witnesses saw her leaving during her lunch from her job with a tall, good-looking man walking very closely behind her. No one knew until much later, but that man was Christopher Wilder. It wouldn't be until weeks later that it would come out that she had previously modeled for Wilder with a friend. Rosario was never seen again. Her body would remain unfound to this day. On March 5th, Elizabeth Kenyon was last seen at a gas station she regularly went to for gas and mechanic work. The station attendant would later give information and a description that placed Christopher Wilder with her. When Beth didn't show up to the family home as expected that evening, they quickly took the matters to the police the next day. This is a very wealthy, well-connected family.
Yeah.
So they knew people in New York and Washington, D.C., statesmen, congressmen.
Yeah.
They had connections.
Oh.
They still couldn't get a fucking answer as to where their daughter was. Yeah. They quickly became frustrated with the investigation and how it was going, and that, you know, her disappearance wasn't being really looked at very seriously.
Yeah.
While looking at old photographs, for whatever reason, her mom remembered that Beth, as she was known, had told her she was going to do a modeling job with her ex-boyfriend, Chris Wilder. That had been set up for Monday evening, the day that she disappeared. They passed this lead on to the officials, and they really just kind of did it because they didn't know what else to do, and it just kind of was a thought. They had no idea how accurate that lead was going to be. The family didn't care much for him. Apparently, they broke off their relationship after he proposed way too quickly in the relationship. And the parents just kind of got a bad vibe from him, as they would have. Mm-hmm. I hope that I would have too. Thankfully, not thankfully, it didn't end up mattering, but she did listen to and respect their concerns enough to break up with him.
Yeah.
So when the family got frustrated with how the investigation was going with the police, they hired private investigators. And one of them, it was a father and son. One of the father had actually been an FBI agent and had been the chief of the FBI in Miami.
Okay.
So he had a lot of connections. His son worked for him. They actually found the best information, that if the police had been listening to them at the beginning, they may have been able to stop some of the things that happened afterwards.
Yeah.
And it's really a damn shame that they weren't heard. So the PIs made contact with Wilder, and he denied any contact with Beth. They quickly caught him in a lie when they spoke to the gas station attendant. But when they passed the info on to the police, nothing was done. So not even looking into Wilder's parole violation. Mm-hmm. They didn't even look at his history. They just were like, yeah, what do you want us to do with that? Like you didn't show him like a photo of a lineup or anything. You just took one picture and you showed it, and he was like, yeah, that's the guy. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Then go and show him a lineup. Yeah. Have him pick out another photo of the guy. There's plenty of photos of this asshole. Yeah. Find one. So they then were able to the PIs were able to piece the connection between Wilder and Rosario Gonzalez after looking into his racing history. Mm-hmm. So they went snooping at his house and found a picture in his garbage of him in front of a race car. And the son remembered seeing Rosario's information on the news about her being missing just a few days beforehand, and was like, that's interesting. We got 2 missing girls, and this guy is in front of, a race car, and he obviously knew Beth. So what's the chances that he knows this other girl too from the racetrack? Yeah. And again, spot on. Good detective work. Police wouldn't do anything about it. So Wilder got on high alert after the PIs made contact with him a couple of times. The local papers were also publishing stories that claimed a race car driver was the link between the missing girls. And even though he wasn't named directly, the info in the stories really left no doubt about who they meant. Yeah. When, they weren't naming names, but they were definitely giving description and details. So he withdrew a large amount of money from the bank and even managed to get his business partner, remember Zeke, who was like, yeah, go ahead and skim the money off the business, gave him a few company credit cards with Zeke's name on it. Before he left town, he was able to sweet talk him into more money and taking the cards for whatever reason. Guy just gave it to him. Police were none the wiser that he had even left town and slipped away. No idea. Nobody was looking at him.
Yeah.
So on March 15th, 15-year-old Colleen Osborne went missing from Daytona Beach after she decided to skip school with a friend so they could go to a spring break concert. Her disappearance and death would later be linked to Wilder because he was placed in that area and checked into a hotel in the town. And this is while he was deciding what to do. When Colleen's mom tried to report her missing, the police stated a 48-hour hold was, they had to do it.
Yeah.
She was labeled as a juvenile runaway, and they were not officially able to file her disappearance until the 19th because it was a weekend. And we've heard that before. That's exactly what happened in the Missy Copsey case.
Yeah.
It's very sad, but it just goes to show you that is a sign of the times.
Yeah.
That happened everywhere. It wasn't just in little small towns. It was in big, major areas. Juvenile runaways were, they couldn't, no harm could have come to them. They just ran away.
Yeah. It makes me laugh too, because it's like crime only happens Monday through Friday, 9 to 5.
Right.
It doesn't happen on the weekend. So since it happened, close to the weekend, we got to wait till Monday.
Right.
Motherfuckers.
Right. The 48 hours, I think, would have put it on Sunday. So they had to wait until Monday to file.
Business hours for criminals only.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Sadly, Colleen's body was eventually found north of Lake Wells, close to a place where Wilder got gas. It took over 2 decades for her body to be identified. She sat in the morgue unidentified for decades.
Oh.
Her mom passed away not knowing what happened to her daughter.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, they didn't know it was Wilder until afterwards. So Wilder checked out early from his motel on the morning of the 16th, and he ended up backtracking to his house back down south. He picked up his dogs, ended up taking them to, and he picked up his briefcase, which was later nicknamed his death kit. Police still had no idea where he was. He took the dogs to a kennel near some property that he had, and nobody was any wiser. Rosario's parents were assured that he was under surveillance and not to worry. Beth's parents were assured that everything was being done to handle this. And here's this motherfucker traveling the state like nobody's business, doesn't care, no worries. The only people worried about it were the parents of the victims, the PIs, and the newspaper. The police not doing shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not doing their job.
No. His next victim would come just days later. On March 18th, Teresa Ferguson was seen leaving a shopping center in Merritt Square Mall. A witness would tell detectives she saw a man leaving with her, had a camera, approached the victim. They went out to his car together, and she overheard the man say something about, quote, a great modeling opportunity. When her boyfriend didn't hear back from her that night, he reached out to Teresa's stepdad, who was a cop. You would think that they would take that seriously. Didn't really help him much. They tracked down that she had gone to the mall on her own after a couple of her friends backed out of their plans for the day, that her car was found parked in the mall parking lot, locked up with some clothing in the back. No foul play could be found. Wilder proceeded on to Tampa and was caught on CCTV, so closed circuit TV, in the drive-up teller at a bank.
Yeah.
He cashed a personal check for a small amount of like $250, and when that one went through and the police didn't show up to arrest him, he went in and cashed a larger account of like about $16,000, a larger cash check, and pretty much emptied his bank account. And then he realized that nobody was on his tail.
Of course
nobody
not.
was looking for him. So authorities didn't know where he was, and they surely would not have showed up because who was going to come?
Yeah.
So on he went, driving to Tallahassee. He checked into a motel room using Kimbrell's credit card, and the motel was close to a busy mall, his favorite place.
Yeah, his hunting grounds.
Yep. So on March 20th in Tallahassee at the Governor Square Mall, Wilder set his sights on his next victim, Linda Grober. She was a 19-year-old college student. She was just out shopping for an anniversary present for her boyfriend. Wilder approached her. She actually politely declined him, said she was not interested in modeling.
Yeah.
And he saw her again a couple minutes later And she, was like, again, no.
Yeah.
A no, thank you. And then she said, but I have 2 roommates who might be interested. Let me give them a call. And they didn't answer. So she came back. She said, sorry, I'm just not interested. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get a hold of them. So bye. Have a nice day.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't having it. So he had seen her actually pull into the mall parking lot, and he pegged her from the parking lot. And he parked his car right next to hers. So as she's exiting the mall, he was right there again. In broad daylight, he managed to punch her in the stomach, then in her face, and shove her into his car. Broad daylight.
Yeah.
Yeah. At one point, she woke up. He pulled off the road to tie her up and cover her eyes and mouth with duct tape. And then she was shoved into the trunk of his car, where she was kept for hours while he drove into the state of Georgia. Linda was then taken to a motel where she was beaten, raped, and electrocuted with a homemade device repeatedly over the course of 24 hours. This is why I say electroshock therapy does not work.
No.
At one point, he super glued her eyes shut and ran a blow dryer over them to help it dry faster.
Jesus.
She managed to kind of blink a little bit and get a little bit of a slit open in one eye so that she wasn't completely unaware of, everything. But it didn't really, it didn't help her to have that. I don't know if that's better or worse. The first opportunity she had to escape, she did.
Good for her.
When Wilder was distracted watching TV, she ran towards the door, but she couldn't get past him. After a wrestling match, she managed to stab at his eyes with her hands and poked his eyes in, as you are taught to do with your thumbs to press in. So then she couldn't get past him. She ran into the bathroom and locked the door. And she continued to make screaming and loud pounding noises as long as she could. He tells her to stop. He's pounding on the door and he's like, stop it right now. And she's like, no, absolutely not.
Yeah.
If I'm going to die, I'm going to die fighting.
Yeah.
And she does that for 30 minutes until she just can't anymore. And nobody's come. That's what's frustrating. Nobody comes.
Wow.
So she, decides that she doesn't hear anything. She doesn't hear him. So she's going to open the door and see if she can get out. And he's gone. He left. He grabbed his shit and walked out and left.
Fucking panicked.
Yeah. So she manages to get to the reception area, and the night manager there actually doesn't want to help her.
Kidding me?
No, I'm not. From her report, he says there's a payphone down the road. Go call. Mind you, she's naked.
Yeah.
She's been abused. She's obviously looking rough. And this poor girl has been through shit all night.
Not to make light of it, but if there's a naked girl bound and you're like, yeah, there's a payphone over there. What else has he seen that's just so bad?
I kind of wonder, what that response would come from.
Yeah.
You're right. But on the other hand, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
So she's like, no, she's just not having it. She's like, you're going to call the fucking police right now.
Yeah.
You're going to call the police. You're going to have them come. They do. She makes a full statement. They take her to the hospital. She identifies him and not knowing him by name, but she is able to he looks like this. He's driving this car. This is what what he said to me, and give them a lot of information. Because it crossed state lines from Florida to Georgia, the FBI can get involved.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, across the state lines. Right. I thought you were going to tell me something else. Like, oh, no, he got away with it. I'm like, God damn it.
Well, there's a lot more going on after that. This is the only beginning.
Okay.
Yeah. So he knows that he's in trouble, and he tries to get as far away from there as he can. Meanwhile, the police finally take the disappearances of Rosario and Beth and their connection to Wilder seriously enough to get a judge to issue a warrant to bring him in on parole violation, because all of those times while he was going to race car driving events, it was breaking his parole. He wasn't supposed to leave his immediate area of Boynton Beach.
Yeah.
And he was driving up to Miami. He was driving to other places he shouldn't have been. So had they just gone and gotten him on that, that information alone, they could have stopped all of this.
Yeah.
But they didn't. So they get to his house on March 22nd, and he's nowhere, of course. He's been long gone. He was already on his 5th victim at that point, and they had no idea he had made it to Texas by then.
Oh,
However,
Jesus.
they still reassured the parents of the victims that he was soon going to be in custody.
Yeah, we've been surveilling him too.
Sure. So like I said, FBI officially took over the case because of Linda's statement and her being found in Georgia. So Teresa Ferguson's body was found on the 23rd of March at Canaveral Grove by utility workmen. She had been beaten in the head with a tire iron and tied up with her legs connected to her neck. The weight of her own body strangled her. So from whatever reason, he didn't ever sexually abuse her, but she did die.
Jesus.
Yeah. And this is the victim that was taken before Linda, who escaped.
In Georgia.
No, she was taken in Florida. Everybody so far has been taken from Florida or like taken in Florida and has either been killed. Linda was the one who he took to Georgia and she managed to escape there. Yeah. Teresa was the victim prior to Linda.
Okay.
So detectives really aren't certain why she wasn't sexually assaulted. There was as well another body found in the same area, and its skeletal remains were identified as Nancy K. Brown, who had gone missing in June of 1983. Police were able to confirm that Wilder was in the area the day she disappeared from Cocoa Beach. She was on vacation with her family, but he's only the top suspect in her disappearance and death. He's not actually been charged, like he never was charged with it.
Yeah.
So Wilder's next victim was young mother and wife Terry Walden. He first approached her on Lamar University campus on March 22nd. She told him he was a dirty pervert. And the next day, she went missing. When the daycare her daughter went to said that Terry hadn't picked up her daughter, and at the time agreed upon, her husband started the search. And after coming up with nothing, he reported her missing. He wasn't sure why she hadn't come home, I guess. And so, and then the daycare called. So it just kind of clicked and he was like, well, shit, I'd have no idea where she would be then. Wilder ended up transferring stolen license plates to Terry's car and ditching his car. And then he made his way to Dallas. So he took her car so that they couldn't find it, ditched his car that they knew people would eventually come and look for.
Oh, yeah.
And took he ended up having a bunch of stolen plates that he had taken from different places and used throughout the course of his travels. So she wouldn't be found until the 26th, when she was found in a ditch canal. The autopsy revealed that she had been stabbed and beaten to death. They could not confirm or deny that she had been sexually assaulted. Her body was that bad. Very sad.
Yeah.
Dallas would prove unfruitful, so Wilder continued on to Oklahoma City, where in March, this is March 25th, he picked up Suzanne Logan. She was just 21 years old at the time. He would drive her tied up and gagged in the trunk of Terry's car, who he picked up at the university campus.
Yeah.
She was in the trunk of that car. He checked into a motel. He proceeded to rape and abuse her as he had his other victims. And this included his man-made torture device so that he could electrocute his victims when they didn't do exactly what he wanted. Suzanne did not survive. Her husband reported her missing right away when she failed to show up to plans that they had made. But there was little effort, almost no effort made by the police because they suspected that her husband was abusive and that she was trying to escape an abusive marriage. And good for her, she finally got away.
Yeah.
So they didn't look for her. So Suzanne's body was found outside of Junction City, Kansas by a fisherman on the 26th. Wilder didn't even try to hide her body. He just left her under a tree on the side of the road. And she had been left there to die. She was still alive. She had multiple stab wounds and beatings all over her body. And she died alone, just on the side of the road. It's fucking horrific.
Yeah.
While somebody was finding her, he was at a restaurant in Junction City getting a meal and getting back out to search for his next victim. Nobody the wiser. Keep in mind, police still have no idea where he is.
Yeah.
None.
Oh, God, he's everywhere. Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas.
Yeah.
He's moving so fast.
Right. Despite the FBI sending out the, be on the lookout bulletins throughout the U.S., nobody has any idea where he's going.
Yeah.
And they're always a step behind him because even though they eventually find out that he has his business partner's credit cards that he's using to pay for these things, the reporting was not electronic. You made a carbon copy of the card and you called it in to the company, the credit card company the next day. and ran it. And that's how you got the transfer of money.
Yeah.
It wasn't swiped right then and there like it is now today.
Yeah.
So they were always about 24 to 48 hours behind where he had been because they had no way of tracing him that way. So he was next on to Colorado, where on March 29th, 18-year-old Cheryl Bonaventura was taken. And just like the others, she was last seen at a mall talking with a really tall, well-dressed man. When she didn't show up to meet up with a friend, they had planned a ski trip together. The friend called her boyfriend and then her parents and was like, I don't know where she is. We were supposed to leave. And none of them knew where she was. They found her abandoned car still parked at the mall, and they knew immediately that something was wrong, as it just was not like her.
Yeah.
Police were notified, but there's not much they could do. Witnesses later confirmed to see Cheryl and Wilder eating at a restaurant in Silverton. The staff there gave statements of how odd the encounter was with the two. Cheryl was really bubbly and nervous and talking a lot and giving just weird information, talking about all sorts of weird things, like how her grandfather had a bakery and he made her favorite donuts and just weird stuff to give locations and names. They didn't pick up on it.
Yeah.
They just thought she was a fucking weird kid with somebody who was probably her dad. They had no idea that he was holding her at gunpoint the entire fucking time.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't until, police questioned them that they realized that she was trying to get help. She had let it drop that they were on their way to Las Vegas. She also let it drop her full name. And, like I said, some weird details that would give places and names that it wouldn't make sense to anybody unless you knew that she was asking for help. So she was with Wilder for days. She was being raped and tortured at night while he paraded her at tourist traps along the road to Arizona by day.
God damn.
So while in Colorado, he was able to buy a gun and he bought hollow point bullets. And that's what he used to force her into submission.
Yeah.
He would keep saying, these bullets will rip through you and it'll just go right through you. And I can shoot you in a place that you would stay alive for days, and just, mental abuse, mental torture. When he tired of her on the 31st of March, he bound her and put her in the trunk of the car, then took her to a deserted area near the Arizona border. He stabbed her and shot her in the chest, and he left her for dead in the desert. Her body was not found until May.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. By now, news of Wilder's trip across the U.S. had made national news. His parents in Australia were quoted as saying, "It may not be as bad as what everyone is making it out to be," but they weren't sure if he was going to be back for his trial that was set just days away in April. Not as bad as what everybody's making it out to be. Who the fuck is going to make this out to be light and happy?
Parents that are delusional.
Very delusional. And the thing that catches me is this is the news. They're not even telling the worst of it, I'm sure.
Or maybe they haven't put it all together. I mean, but
maybe. I'm just thinking if they're saying we're sure it's not as bad as what they're saying, that's not even the worst of what he's doing.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, delusion. So Wilder's photo was everywhere it could possibly be. Across malls in America, security was being told to be on the lookout, beef up security. He actually made the top 10 on the FBI's most wanted list. And yet somehow this motherfucker makes it to Las Vegas to a mall that was holding a 17 magazine modeling contest. He walked right the fuck in, made himself at home, had his camera. There are photographs of him watching the contestants. He's sitting right there.
Oh, wow.
He's there plain as day in plain sight.
He's so emboldened because he hasn't been caught.
He hasn't been caught.
Just,
right.
The audacity. The audacity.
He talked to several girls there, passing around his fake business cards. And he was, like I said, photographed, observing the whole thing. And this is where he met his next victim, Michelle Korfman. She was 17 years old. She was trying to break into modeling, and she had convinced her parents to let her go to this on her own so that, if she was disappointed, it wouldn't be a big deal. She'd just come home and resume her life and it wouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah.
So the two were seen leaving the mall late on the afternoon of April 1st, and a California highway patrolman confirmed a sighting of Wilder driving her car near the border not long after that. For whatever reason, he backtracked back to Vegas, checked into a new motel, and was seen eating at a restaurant within viewing distance of the hotel and the car. Okay. So she's in the trunk of the car.
Oh.
Michelle was reported missing by her parents when she didn't show up at home that night. They would eventually offer a very large reward for any information into her disappearance. The police did seem to be taking this very seriously. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's because of the nationwide news of Wilder, but I don't know that they had connected that necessarily at the time. But they were taking it seriously. Her car was found in the Caesars Palace Casino in Vegas a few days later, but not a trace of her or Wilder was found. Unfortunately, her body was then found 45 days later in the Angeles National Forest between Vegas and Los Angeles. It took another month to identify her body with dental records.
Why?
They couldn't identify her, and they didn't realize to look for a girl missing from Colorado.
Yeah.
The coroner's report confirmed that she had been violently abused sexually and physically before her death. Her cause of death was listed as asphyxiation. She had been forced face down into the dirt and the soil of the desert and could not breathe. On April 4th, the day that Tina Rosico went missing in Torrance, California, that was also the day that Wilder became an international criminal. He failed to appear for his trial in the crimes against the two teenage girls from his 1982 arrest in Australia. Yeah. And he jumped the bail, so now he's wanted everywhere. Tina was at a local mall, of course, looking for a summer job when Wilder approached her to model, this time with John Powers Modeling Agency. So the competitor to Barbizon. Yes. They first went to Huntington Beach for a photo shoot. Then he kind of got more aggressive, and he said that they needed a mountain setting for more photos, had her change and like take off her top and her bra and put a jacket on that he had so that she was basically tits out. Yeah. And was doing photo shoot that way. And as they drove into the canyons, he then pulled out his gun and raped her. He then tied her and blinded her with tape, covered her eyes with sunglasses so that nobody would see it, and the two were off. She was just sitting in the passenger side seat, bound hands and ankles, and glasses over her eyes so nobody could see. There was duct tape over her eyes, so she wasn't aware of where she was going. Yeah. So she, of course, was a victim to his sexual assaults and electroshock therapy for days. She ended up being with him the longest. The mental and physical abuse were enough to brainwash her, basically, into doing whatever he wanted. Yeah. She was, I think in her case, I don't want to assume too much, but I think in her case, she was able to how do you say that? Compartmentalize. So that she could do what she needed to survive. Yes. And protect herself. Yeah. And it's something that can happen very easily in any situations. That's, how people start with like multiple personality disorder. Like another personality comes out to take care of you so that you can mentally withdraw. I think in her case, that's probably what happened. And that's why she lasted so long with him. Yeah. Because he later goes on, or later had told her in her report that she was robotic enough that he was comfortable keeping her. So here she is brainwashed. She's, doing whatever she is told. And Wilder, he, for whatever reason, he's close to Mexico. They get down to San Diego, but he doesn't try to cross the border. Instead, he decides they're going to go back east.
Why not?
Yeah. So he and Tina made it to Indiana, where they both, and he had her for days. Keep in mind, during the day, they're driving. At night, she's being abused. Yeah. So they get to Indiana, where they abducted Donette Wilt, and that was on April 10th. So he picked up Tina on the 4th, and they picked up Donette on the 10th. Wilder told Tina that he was finding a replacement for her so that she could go home. She said she half believed him. Yeah. He sent Tina over to Donette with lies of her boss wanting to talk to her about a modeling job. She was at the mall looking for a summer job, just like Tina had been at the mall looking for a summer job. They got her out of the mall, where Wilder then threatened her at gunpoint to get in his car. They got to a secluded area where Wilder then bound and taped up his new victim. Then they went back and collected Donette's car from the mall. So she got put in the trunk, just like every other victim, while he and Tina are driving through town.
Cycle starting over.
Yeah. So Tina was allowed to take the keys of Donette's car and would follow behind Wilder as they drove to the motel. Why she didn't try to escape, this is where like the Stockholm syndrome effect kind of comes in. She at that point was doing whatever he asked, and she didn't deviate from the plan.
Oh, see, I was thinking maybe she wanted to help this girl, and maybe they could work together and get out. I don't know. I just thought...
No. I think that she, at some point, wanted to help this other girl, but I don't think that she was physically or mentally capable of doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. From there, the three traveled to Illinois to dump Donette's car and then made it through multiple states going towards New York. During the day, Tina would drive them all around while Donette was drugged in the back seat. And at night, both girls were repeatedly raped and tortured with the electroshock device and by other means. At one point, they were made to have sex with each other while he looked. And it became I'm done with you. Go take a shower. I'm on to the next girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was nightmarish. They got to Niagara Falls on the 11th of April, where he and Tina played tourist. They went out, took photos.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was parading her all over the place. She didn't try to escape. Donette, meanwhile, is in the trunk of the car, drugged. And then in the early morning of the 12th, a news broadcast brought everything to a halt, and Wilder got scared. Tina's mom was on a national news station asking that she be returned home unharmed, and he panicked. So Wilder again drugged Donette, got the girls in the car. They took off to an area near, I think it's Barrington. It's either Barrington or Barrington, New York.
Yeah.
Donette was forced out of the car where they pulled over. She was taken into a wooded area off the road. He assaulted her again for, shits and giggles one last time. He was out there for over a half an hour while Tina was just sitting in the parked car.
Yeah.
He took the keys to the car with him, but she could have gotten out of the car.
Yeah.
But I guess not knowing how long he was going to be, you can't gauge that. Could have been a minute, could have been 2 minutes, could have been, like it was 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So she didn't move. While Tina's in the car and he's out there assaulting Donette, he's done with her. He stabs her a couple of times and he leaves her for dead. Except she manages to get away. Donette was able to loosen the bindings on her hands and used her shirt to wrap tightly around her chest to stop the bleeding.
Uh-huh.
And then she moved out of the wooded area to find help. About 10 minutes after Tina and Wilder drove off, they actually came back because Wilder started panicking again, thinking, well, what if she's not dead? What if I didn't stab her enough? I should have shot her.
Yeah.
And he comes back and she's gone. And he flips the fuck out. So he tells Tina, we need a new car. Because now she knows the car we're in.
Uh-huh.
And she can identify us. So we need to get a new car. And we need to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
So Donette was able to flag down a repairman who was lost, actually. He had driven down the wrong road, and it was a very secluded road.
Yeah.
If he had never come, she might not have survived. So she gets to a hospital, and she's able to give details of her capture and the man responsible for it, along with the other young girl that's with him that's doing his bidding. Yeah. Authorities are still concentrating their search on the western part of the U.S., and if Donette had not been able to get away, it could have been weeks or months before anybody knew to look for him on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Wilder had one last victim that was killed solely for her car. So Beth Dodge had just pulled her flashy gold metallic Pontiac Firebird into the Eastview Mall in Victor, New York. This was April 12th. Wilder came up, forced her back into the car at gunpoint and over into the passenger seat. And again, Wilder told Tina, follow him out to a secluded area. She's driving the other car.
Yeah.
And he kills Beth. So they pull over. Beth was just forced out of the car into some trees. He shot her quickly, and she was dead instantly. He shot her in the back of the head.
Jesus.
They then drove both cars back into town to dump the Mercury Cougar that he had stolen from Terry Walden in Texas. He had been driving that car this whole time.
Oh.
In a very surprising move, Wilder did let Tina go. He drove her to the Boston area where Tina got on a flight at Logan International Airport, and she went back to L.A. He let her go.
Back to, was it?
She was taken from LA.
Oh, I thought it was Colorado.
No, she was from Torrance.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of victims here. There's a lot of ground that he covered.
Oh, shit. That's so fast.
Yeah. So he bought a plane ticket for her using his business partner's stolen card.
Mm-hmm.
Made Tina kiss him on the cheek, knowing that CCTV was going to capture all this.
Yeah.
Handed her a wad of cash, told her he was fleeing to Canada. And at 2:15 p.m., Tina was on the plane on her way back home.
Awesome.
Yeah. So as Wilder made his way up to the Canadian border, he again attempted to kidnap a victim who was on the side of the road by a broken down car. Carol Hilbert claims that she didn't think much of it when a nicely dressed gentleman pulled up. You know, her car was broken down. She couldn't get it to start. Here comes, the cavalry, essentially, going to help her. And she gets into the car, and then a news report comes across the radio, and she puts two and two together. That this is the guy that they're talking about.
Yeah.
And as the car comes rolling to a stop, she pushes the door open as hard as she can, jumps out of the car, rolling and sliding down a hill, and she makes it to the first house that she can find. And they let her in the house, and she gets away, and she sees him just speeding off to parts unknown.
Yeah.
She's very lucky, lucky, because he's unchecked. And he's gone through multiple states unchecked.
I mean, good for her for putting two and two together, though, too, also.
Yes, very much.
Most people would be in a panic because their car's broken down and then elated because someone actually stopped to help them.
Right.
But, yeah.
Yeah, she's very lucky. Yeah. She's very lucky to have survived him and gotten away unharmed. So he's desperate to get to Canadian border right now. Wilder drove straight through up to New Hampshire where he needed to get gas. He needed to pull over.
Mm-hmm.
He was driving so fast and trying to get away from there that he almost ran out of gas. So it was there while he was asking the station attendant what documentation he would need and how far it was to Canada that two plainclothes officers recognized the gold Firebird. It had no front license plate. They kind of pulled up along the side of the road by the station, and they look over, and who the fuck's there?
Mm-hmm.
The man that everybody's looking for.
Yeah.
They recognize him, and they quickly call out for him to stop. And they begin to exit their car. He tries to get into the passenger side door. It's locked. So he has to go around, and he's trying to get in and reach for his gun.
Yeah.
By that time, Officer Leo Jellison reached him first, and as Wilder is diving into the seat, Ellison comes behind with a bear hug and is trying to pull him out, and his partner's behind him with his gun on him. Wilder manages to reach his gun.
Oh, damn it.
He shoots off a shot, and it goes through him. Mind you, these are hollow point bullets, goes through him and passes to the police officer. The police officer backs up, and, he's looking down, and he's like, fuck, I've been shot.
Yeah.
And his partner still has Wilder trained, with the gun trained on him.
Mm-hmm.
Wilder, for unknown reasons, and there's many different versions of why he did it, he shot himself and it went directly through his heart. So people are saying, some reports are saying that he committed suicide, obviously, to avoid capture and face any punishment.
Yeah.
And others are saying that it was maybe a mistake, that he was trying to shoot through himself again to the officer.
Yeah.
I feel that this bastard was slimy enough that he wanted to evade, and he knew the chances of him passing another bullet through his body to get to an officer's body would result in him being seriously injured. You're not going to get away from anybody.
No, but hollow points aren't meant to penetrate the body either. Like, they're meant to stop.
It stopped at the police officer. It went all the way through.
No, it went all the
him.
way through, but
yeah,
those are designed to not go all the way through.
Yeah, it was, somehow it did it. So I don't know.
Because it was so close, it may have it's that close,
It could have been, yeah. I mean, it was kind of through off to the side. So it might have been just because that, that fleshy area of the side of your body is not as wide. I don't know, but it made it through. And, I don't know why you would shoot yourself again thinking that.
I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It makes sense to me that he was like, well, it's done. I'm done. I'm caught. I'm
because that's probably, well, no. I don't know. It wasn't the first time he was caught, but like, yeah, I guess maybe it was the sudden surprise of them like finding him when he thought he was, home free. Or
I think he knew that because the FBI were involved, he wasn't going to evade charges.
Yeah.
So he just wasn't going down. He wasn't going to do it. So Officer Jellison was harmed, but he survived. There is, like I said, still to this day speculation on whether Wilder killed himself to evade arrest or it was a mistake. I would like to say that with Wilder's death, this was the end of the ordeal everyone had suffered through. But we all know, the victims who survived and the families of those who didn't are going to be haunted by this maniac for forever. There is actually just no way of knowing how many young girls he abused in both the U.S. and the Australia continent who haven't come forward yet because they were scared to.
Yeah.
Or maybe some people wanted to come forward but didn't want their names out there, didn't want to be linked to him, just wanted to, deal with it privately in their own way.
Yeah.
There's just no way of knowing because there were a lot of people, even though, like those first few who made reports, they didn't want to process in court with him. They didn't want to go through that. So no matter, how they were able to heal, there's just so much trauma that this one man caused.
And so little time to, well, just that spree, but also, in his life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, within, this starts in March and ends in April.
Yeah.
He barely was on a spree for maybe 5 weeks.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So touching back to the Wanda Beach murders that started this all, police have some evidence that they have had tested for DNA. They're still trying to conclusively link Wilder to the murders, but he still remains the best person of interest in the case. There's no doubt that those investigators are pinpoint to him, and they are assured that he is the person that did it. So it's hopefully, with new technology that comes out, what little bit of evidence that they have left, they at some point can conclusively name him as the person who did that, the person responsible. This one was a wild ride. I read 2 very well-written books on Christopher Wilder and some news articles from my research that I recommend if anyone wants to delve in deeper. There will, of course, be links to everything. There's just so much info. And I would have liked to have given the victims, more information on the victims. There was just so many that I couldn't go into their family history and their detail in depth as much as I would have liked to. And I believe, as always, their voices should be the loudest. But this guy he ruined so many lives. Yeah. It's crazy. What's crazy to me too is I had never heard of this.
No,
I've never heard of this guy. And he was nicknamed the Beauty Queen Killer.
Oh.
Yeah.
From all the
because that was his thing. Yeah. He wanted to be around beautiful women. He wanted them subservient and doing exactly what he wanted them to do.
Yeah.
I had never ever heard of that. So this was a new one for me, and I'm glad that I looked into it. Like I said, I started just looking at the Wanda Beach murders. Yeah. I had no idea how this was going to go. No idea at all.
No.
It was crazy.
Yeah, I'd never heard of that.
Yeah. So anyways, if anybody wants to, go further down a rabbit hole, there's a lot of information. And if you guys made it to the end with us, thank you.
Thank you.
We're very, 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 wanted to make this as brief as possible. I know it's not. So thank you for making it to the end. Please let us know what you guys thought about this case, what you think, and any thoughts that you have on any of our cases that we discuss. We want to hear from you guys. And, to anyone listening in Australia, especially, I'm curious your take on this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe maybe you guys have better information where you're at of his earlier crimes. So I'm curious to know, did, the information that I got from a United States perspective, I guess, did it get it right? We would love, of course, for any of you to reach out to us on the website, on Instagram, Facebook, or even Twitter, as little as I'm on Twitter. Twitter is, I don't know, it's like the redheaded stepchild. I don't want to go near it, but every once in a while I get on it.
No.
Yeah. So we want to thank you for making our first year of this podcast so wonderful and successful. We never, I mean, at least I never imagined that we would reach as many people worldwide as we have.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank everybody for listening and just for everybody to know how much it means to us, for sure.
Yeah.
To have this kind of platform and, you know, people are listening in these just far off reaches of places that I may never even get to go visit, but it's awesome that you guys are with us and listening.
Yeah. Well, maybe, you know, hopefully if this pandemic clears up that we can visit these places and, you know.
Oh, we're going to go on tour.
Maybe. Well, once this pandemic is over, we'll see.
Well,
I'm not, you know. Yeah.
Okay. We got grand plans over here.
Do.
Yeah. How are you going to combat with me getting motion sick?
They make drugs for that.
Yeah, I will be passed out for most of that. Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yay.
Yay.
Party. There'll be a lot of selfies with you passed out.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. I also want to thank you, Bryce, for coming along on this crazy ride. Like you had a choice.
Yeah.
Whatever. You've
been held hostage.
That's not funny, actually.
I'm being held hostage.
Stop.
I'm blinking SOS.
Okay, whatever. I still thank you. I want to thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, honey.
Thanks, babe. So everybody have a very safe and happy new year. And just know that we're there with you in spirit through all this crazy.
Yes.
Yes. And like I said, merch information will be coming soon. Not that I expect any big need for this, but it's there if you guys want it. So with that, we're going to say goodbye. Thank you again for listening and making it through all of our ramblings. And we just want to appreciate everything that you guys have given us the opportunity to do. Everybody stay safe. And remember, stay out of the damn woods.
Stay out of the woods.
That doesn't change for 2021.
No. Oh, and thank you, Dina.